Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our first speaker, Solace, Kidisil. Solace.
Nsano is a fintech headquartered in Ghana, but over the past 10 years, we have been working to bridge payments across Africa. And so my presentation would be more on Africa-wide, not particularly Ghana. So I'm hoping that if you could put it in slideshow for me. Thank you. So let's talk about Africa, and let's talk about what digital businesses are doing in Africa. So typically, over the last decade, there have been a lot of hype words in tech. Today, we are dealing with AI, the metaverse, we are dealing with 5G, we are dealing with a few other things like blockchain. Before we had cloud, we had big data, we even had a brief stint with Hadoop, 3D printing. Almost every time there's something new coming up. And each of these new tech hype words essentially represents an industry that serves as an opportunity for digital businesses to climb on, right? So most of our businesses have been built around one or two of these hype words. Now, my business is built on fintech. 10 years ago, when I joined Nsano, at that time, fintech wasn't a word. And then suddenly, I started seeing articles calling us fintech. I called my boss, I said, it looks like our industry has a name. It's called fintech. Let's also bite into it, right? And one of the things that actually happens for every hype word or hype technology that comes up is that it goes through a certain cycle, right? It starts with a trigger, saying that there's a new innovation, there's a new way to do something, there's a new technology that will revolutionize everything we are doing. Then it gets to all sorts of expectations. We are dreaming. Maybe we can even go to the moon with it. People want to build spaceships, but we still have to figure out how the technology will work. And then we come down to, okay, this is what it is. It is not all the things that we dreamt it was. Then I found that there's actually a cycle for this called the Gardner cycle. After we get through the realities of whatever the technology presents, then we will sort of even out into productivity and how it will look. And usually, for the words that I mentioned earlier, if you don't manage to get to productivity, you fade out. So we get up as tech companies, we take a bet on a new hype word. We hope we can find a reasonable commercial business case or justification so that we can ease into productivity, make money, right, build our businesses. Else, if we bet on the wrong hype word, we will fade into something else or have to pick another word to adopt. So this has typically been the cycle for most of the digital businesses that I'm aware of. Now, what has happened generally? In the last 2 decades, we've had 2 separate industrial revolutions. This is global, right? So somewhere in the 1800s, mechanization started, the small pumps. We are looking at how electric power came in the next century and also changed how the industry actually looked like. So almost every century there was an iteration, right? By Industry 3.0, we were dealing with computers, we were dealing with the starting of the internet, we were dealing with a lot of new shiny things that were not necessarily linked to manufacturing, but were still linked to a new industry that could thrive, right? Now, Industry 4.0 and 5.0 did not wait for the century to end. In 20 years, we sort of went through these 2 iterations. And what it means for us as digital businesses is that the evolution now is faster than it was before. You practically just start understanding a new technology and tomorrow there's a new one out there and you're wondering, should I stop what I'm doing and chase this one or should I realize this, right? So there's a lot of pressure on us to sort of make the right bets, to put in the right investments. But the other side is that this is what the world is saying. But does this really reflect industry in Africa? Or does this reflect industry in Ghana? Have we really gone past 2.0? Do we have like very reliable electric power here? No. So a problem that the West was dealing with in the 1900s, you are practically dealing with it whilst all this rapid evolution is happening at the same time. Which is why the local context and the local challenges are important for digital businesses to situate ourselves. We do not have all the luxuries that very developed countries have because we ourselves are still going through the industry phases of trying to get to 3.0, even though we still have capability for 5.0. Now, what does this mean for us? In Africa, we have a very unique story. I like the fact that as I travel across Africa, and I do a lot, I'll say 90% of my travel is in Africa. It's always a new adventure. You know, you could be on a ferry in Freetown, and then the ferry decides to go off, and then they're trying to pour fuel in it in the middle of a thunderstorm. You ask yourself, why am I even in this country? But Africa presents a lot of opportunity. It's like the last frontier. And we are seeing it globally because almost everyone is zooming in on us. If we didn't have anything, I don't think they'll be coming, right? We have over 1 billion people on this continent. And what does that mean? It means consumers. So everyone is thinking about how can we wrap our hands around Africa. But we also have unique challenges. So in Industry 5.0, we are talking about data. We are talking about how do we automate systems, how do we automate interactions, but do we understand enough about ourselves to be able to automate it? I won't go too much into AI. I'll leave the experts, my brother, to take that up. But the question of what is available, what format it exists in, whether the data you have is even credible, right? And how relevant it is to the new industry that is forming are questions we have to answer. Aside from the services industry, banks, telcos, fintechs, small IT companies, we really don't have a digitized base of data. Government will probably be the biggest storehouse, but is it in the right format for us to consume? So whilst we are thinking about how can I use the newest tech industry, AI, in my operations, we have to ask questions about what is available to us and what can we do with it. We then have to look at the fact that we have a very large labor force on this continent. As AI is developing, other countries are excited about it because their population is running out. And AI probably presents the best opportunity for their countries to still run with fewer people, right? And the reverse is for Africa. So essentially, we all go running after the new fad. We may get where we are going, but we'll have a lot of people sitting at home that we have nothing for them to do. So that is a question that we tend to ask ourselves, not just as private participants, but even from a policy standpoint. How exactly are we going to balance the consumerism of Africa and our productivity? Now, there are underlying access challenges. I've already mentioned electricity. So, according to UNCTAD, across Africa, over 53% of our people don't have access to electricity. That's a very serious dynamic, right? And then you have the internet. So we are assuming that we are all on the information highway, but less than 50% of us are there. What it means is, as a digital business, there are systemic challenges that you can't solve by technology alone, right? And you should be aware of it so that you sort of understand what your market size is going to look like. in whatever jurisdiction you decide to operate. Then we have ethical responsibility, policies that are made, regulators, a very unique position. Roland and I were talking about how in some countries there is no regulation for USSD, but there are also some countries you can't afford USSD because I think they don't understand. They missed the memo on what USSD was supposed to do for Africa. So you are going for a short code and they are charging you $4,000. I'm like, a month. What business am I going to run that will give me $4,000 a month? Right. So there are those existential challenges that we have, and it's not uniform across the continent, right? However, when we choose to focus on our local problems and find local versions of these tech, new industries, solutions, we actually make a dent. And I won't bore you with the numbers of how mobile money has grown across Africa, take Kenya, take Ghana, even now in Nigeria, because we see what it's doing and how it's transforming us. And this was taking very basic technology. When fintech was coined, believe me, they weren't thinking about USSD. There is this fintech influencer on Twitter that I got into a beef with 8 years ago because he came to put the top fintech countries across the world, and he only has South Africa. South Africa, okay. So I sent him a message. Please, I think you missed Kenya, because M-Pesa was doing wonderful things at that time. He didn't even know what it was. He said, oh, as for Africa, South Africa, oh, the rest of Africa, they don't see what is going on. Thank God the narrative has changed now. Now, how do we sort of relate the kind of success we have chalked from the investment that telcos have made, the investment that banks have made, the investment that IT companies, fintechs have made to build this whole industry that started as a hype word that is very relevant in our local context, right? GSMA released this report, State of the Industry report for 2023, where they are saying, GSMA is saying, I would love to believe it and see the numbers and calculations behind it, but they're saying that they have found proof that for African countries that have implemented mobile money, there was an additional $150 billion added to their GDP than what it would have been without mobile money. Now, if this metric is right, then it means that there can be a viable commercial business case if we choose to focus on what the local challenges mean for us, and then what the global opportunities that these new technologies are giving us are, and find a meeting point, right? So it's not enough to say there's this new ChatGPT. So I'm going to build ChatGPT for Tree. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions, right? Is it a problem you are solving? How many of us can write Tree? I had 2 in Tree, and my headmaster congratulated me because he expected a 4. So I obviously will not be a customer. But those are the kind of questions that as digital businesses, we have to go beyond our enthusiasm for the tech hype word to relate it to what our local context is. Now, I'm going to talk about one of our biggest problems and possible opportunities on this continent. For every other global superpower that is now in industry phase 5.0, one of the things they really got right by industry 3.0, 4.0 was how to trade. And not just trade within the country, but trade with others. Here we have the biggest trade area after, which officially launched in 2021. I don't know how many of you have been able to buy something from Abidjan. I don't know what you buy from Abidjan, but you know, you could buy ointments, like they have really nice creams. We'll talk about it later. $3.4 trillion That is the anticipated market value. But as we speak now, regardless of what hype words you have, you can talk about metaverse. MTN has a metaverse area, right? I don't know who is there. You can talk about AI. You can talk about 5G and all the shenanigans. Who is tackling that? No one. It's an opportunity sitting down for us. There are questions, though. Don't get me wrong. We are not clear on policy. Last week, the richest black man said he needs 30 visas to travel across Africa. That is a very big indictment on NAFTA, to be honest. That man is rich. I can't match his bank statement. If he needs 30 visas, I can't imagine what I'll need. But that shows you that there is a problem of how people move. If people can move, how are goods moving? How are services being exchanged? How can you, as a fintech, serve a company in Somalia? As of now, there's no framework for it. So definitely, there are some few hurdles that are non-technical to be solved. But then, where regulation hasn't caught up, there's always opportunity to innovate, right? And the question we ask ourselves is, how can we even make payments? So my husband was ordering flowers for someone in Botswana, got a florist on Instagram. Now, how do I send her the money to deliver the flowers? So we went through all the iterations and we decided it had to be a bank transfer. So he had to go to the bank, write a statement, write that he's buying flowers, and then ask them to transfer the money. Now, thankfully, we seem to have a lot of trust across borders, because the lady actually delivered the flowers before the money got there. She just wanted proof that you had gone to the bank and sent it, and then got the money after 4 days. But then it shows you that there is a huge gap that exists across our continent. And how do you even facilitate this trade? What platforms are allowing you to see what you can buy in Kenya? Because they have beautiful Maasai cloths that we don't have anywhere else on the continent. Or the fact that in Zambia, they love our shea butter and our chocolate. But we sit here and we are not aware that there's a whole market. In fact, there's this butter in Zambia that anyone who goes has to buy for me, because I've not tasted that butter anywhere in the world. It's made in Zambia. And I literally buy 4 or 5, stock up. It's the only thing in my house that you can't touch without permission. And it shows you that we do have some gems here and there. Aside from the general oil, gold, huge commodity trading, there is actually room to achieve this $3.4 trillion. So let's ask ourselves some questions. How do we bridge the gap? Really? And there's a huge gap. First of all, you are dealing with over 40 currencies. This is even with Francophone Africa all having the CFA and the ZOF. We have 40. And very few of them are tradable. So if you go beyond Abidjan, maybe Lagos, Freetown, no one wants to see this, right? You can have CFA in this trade block because of the Francophone countries, but if you go to Botswana and give them CFA, they will look at you like you're mad. So we have an issue of extra currencies, very few of them tradable. We have, so apparently we have over 2,000 languages. 75 of them are spoken by over 1 million people. Even that is a lot. So let's say maybe colonization helped us small, so we can reduce it to 4 official languages if you take the English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Even with those 4, it means that you can't essentially build for this over 1 billion people when you're only thinking Anglophone or you're only thinking Francophone. So there's that conversation that as tech, we need to understand that we should be able to translate. Every time I'm going to Abidjan, I spend a week on Duolingo, else I won't eat. Because how you tell them you want breakfast? So you have to learn what eggs are, bread, and at least if you say Milo, they know what Milo is. But it tells you that there's a lot more we have to do as tech companies, not to sit within our silos and expect that it's enough to build for just Ghana and it will work everywhere else. And then we're also talking about access, right? So for the trade across Africa to work, it means we have to do a bit more on financial inclusion. So I know in Ghana, because of mobile money and everything, now we have very nice metrics. That's an industry we can pat ourselves on. Apparently, over 90% of adult Ghanaians have access to a financial service of one kind or the other. However, we have to ask deeper questions. What does that translate into? Can you get a loan for your business? Can you get a letter of credit to be able to receive items from Morocco as a small business or as an individual, sole proprietor? There are still nuances that are missing. And don't forget that this 90% is the stream that exists in Ghana and Kenya. If you go to South Sudan, it's a different metric. We are looking at under 10%. So there's still a lot of room to be done, work to be done. So we know that for us at Nsano, 10 years ago, our boss put us in one room and told us this was our vision, to protect 50% of Africa's GDP. What I realized in that meeting was I'll never meet it, because the GDP would change every year. But that aside, it sets the conversation that we really would not be able to make a dent if we don't focus on the continent as a whole, and if we don't look at how we can build systems that people can trust, systems that are reliable and are effective. Now, in Sub-Saharan Africa, there are apparently 44 formal registered micro, small, and medium enterprises, 44 million. That was a staggering statistic for me. I mean, this is aside the Instagram companies, the side hustles, all those unregistered ones. And these are businesses that are not really being served. And the metric IFC is saying that 51% of them do not have access to financial tools. So for me as a fintech, this is a gaping hole in the conversation. These are opportunities. So our challenges actually serve as the opportunities for us. And how do we leverage these new technologies that we can access to make these challenges go away, hopefully? So there has been talk over the last 5 years of embedded finance and how fintechs can actually create new ways that finance is accessed. That is not the traditional way. Okay, some people don't like going to the bank. How many of us like to go to the bank? APSA is here. So when you give us other avenues to access the services in a way I'm comfortable with, I'm good, right? So one of the areas under embedded finance is trade finance, where we are looking at how can we enable these cross-border payments? How can we enhance fraud detection? How can we have access to trade tools that will make us be able to get our supplies and supply easily? And how do we mitigate risk with insurance, for instance, so that when your goods are traveling to Burkina and a soldier decides to impound it, you are not completely at a loss. Hopefully that won't happen. But all these things actually it happens. So it's relevant to businesses, and these are opportunities for us in this. So when I'm looking at my tech hype words, I'm looking at which of these problems is it solving for me, or which of these can I build a solution for that makes commercial sense, that gets us to productivity, and actually changes the metric on what is happening in Africa. So what next? We have to clarify our propositions. For a lot of us, I don't think there's any digital business that starts out and hits what they have planned. So even when we wrote our vision, at that time, we hadn't even got our first bank. So there were a lot of meandering. There were other things we did before we arrived where we were going. And we haven't even arrived. Let's say we are still on our journey. So for a lot of digital businesses, still trying to figure out how to position ourselves, how to leverage the new technologies that are available to us, we need to clarify what our proposition is. What can we offer? What challenge can we take on? And find ways to use technology and engaging the relevant stakeholders to find solutions to. We have to build models and frameworks. You know, the fintech industry has changed a lot in 10 years. We do a lot of collaborations now. We talk to each other. We have associations. It wasn't like that in the beginning. We're all trying to figure out, like, we're in the sea, find your way, you know. But now, things have settled. What it means is that we should build models on top of this. We should build the next frameworks that make it possible for a company headquartered somewhere in Takoradi to be able to provide solutions that Zimbabweans will be using, Somalians will be using, and my lovely Gambia will be using. We also need enabling policies. But you see, when we decide to wait for the enabling policies, we won't get anything done. So whilst we are doing, we will also pray for them. We'll join them in handshakes, and then we'll hopefully put them along to get to the point where they get us able to do something, and then we execute. But a point of caution is that in all these hype words, in all these new technologies we are trying our hands on, cybersecurity and the sort of operational rigor we must have as tech companies. So it's not just tech. You know, we usually get lost in this fad of, if my technology works, it's fine. But if your technology is not backed by the right processes and systems, it can all go down very quickly. So the operational rigor that is required to get these things implemented the right way, to be aware that with global opportunities comes global risks, and a small boy in Russia can decide to target you and drain your account overnight, means that you have to be more aware of what kind of safeguards you can put in place operationally. So that, I think, is a good cautionary note for us as we jump onto the next wave.